My name's Aaron Ralston. Whoever finds this, please make an attempt to get it to them.
Trapped 12 feet deep between rocks, this man is waiting for the last few moments of his life. For the past 100 hours, he has been sitting alone in Canyonlands National Park in the U.S. with his hand trapped under a 360 kilograms, 800 pounds boulder. In this desolate valley, there is no one to hear his screams, nor does he have any way to call for help. After fighting for his life for 5 days, he finally picked up his camera with one hand and started recording his final moments, so that after he was gone, the world could know what really happened in the narrow canyon of Blue John Canyon. Welcome back to ALGEM TV videos, viewers. Aaron Ralston was born on October 27, 1975, in Marion, Ohio. He was only 12 years old when he started participating in sports like skiing and backpacking in his high school. Soon, his passion grew, and he started learning other adventure sports like rafting and hiking. He was so attached to adventure sports that Aaron left his 9-to-5 job and started devoting all his time to adventure sports. After quitting his job, he went straight to Aspen, Colorado. Surrounded by rocky mountains and filled with snowy peaks, this small resort town remains an open field for skiing and mountaineering all year round. This was the place where Aaron's hobby was about to become an obsession. Actually, a few years before quitting his job, Aaron had selected 3 climbing projects that he wanted to achieve over the next few years during his annual vacations. First, he wanted to conquer all of Colorado's 59 14ers, peaks over 14,000 feet high, which is why they are called 14ers. Second, he wanted to set a world record by conquering all these peaks in winter. And finally, he wanted to conquer the highest peaks of all the U.S. states. By the end of 2002, when he quit his job, he had already conquered 36 of the 59 14ers in winter. And now that he was fully available to the world of climbing, achieving this record-breaking feat seemed even more possible. After quitting his job, he went on several dangerous hiking trips with his friends, and once he even came back from the brink of death. Because of his habit of playing with danger, friends often refused to go with him, and this time something similar happened. One day, Aaron and some friends planned a hiking trip, but a few days before departure, for some reason, his friends refused to come. Aaron didn't intend to go on this trip alone, so he thought he would go somewhere else during this long weekend. He decided to head to Utah, but where exactly in Utah was not yet decided. Usually, whenever Aaron went somewhere alone, his roommates knew his whereabouts. But this time, since he himself didn't know where he would go in Utah, he only told his friends that he was going to Utah. While traveling, he finally decided that he would go to Canyonlands National Park in Utah and spend the next 5 days climbing various unknown slot canyons. Slot canyons are narrow, deep valleys that pass through high rocky mountains and plains. Canyonlands National Park has many such slot canyons. Every year, about 800,000 tourists visit here. But because this national park is spread over thousands of square kilometers, 95% of its areas remain completely desolate and deserted. One such unknown canyon was named Blue John Canyon. On Saturday, April 26, 2003, Aaron arrived at Canyonlands National Park around 9:00 a.m. He parked his truck on a dirt road about 15 miles from Blue John Canyon, and from there, he rode his bicycle toward the canyon. Aaron packed only for a single day, including 2 burritos, 4 liters of water, and a little climbing gear. Then, pedaling fast, he reached the entrance of Blue John Canyon. From there, his hike began. By around 2:30 p.m., Aaron had gone 7 miles inside the canyon. After another 15 minutes, he started descending into the canyon's depths. From above, this canyon looked about 11 to 12 feet deep. The edges were getting even narrower like a drain, and large boulders were stuck between these walls. Aaron began descending very carefully, placing 1 step at a time on the rocks. Ahead, he found a boulder the size of a bus tire. The plan was for Aaron to hang from this boulder and jump to the canyon floor. Moving forward cautiously, he grabbed the lower edge of the boulder, but before he could put his full weight on it, he heard the boulder starting to slip. He immediately realized the boulder was moving, let go of it, and jumped straight to the canyon floor. His landing was a bit harder than he had imagined, but he landed in the canyon without any injury. But the next moment, that same boulder slipped and fell directly onto Aaron's right arm. For the next several minutes, a panicked and terrified Aaron screamed loudly from the intensity of the pain and kept trying to free his arm. But after a while, the reality began to dawn on him that this wasn't going to be so easy. To comfort himself a little, he quickly took out his water bottle from his bag and drank most of the remaining 1 liter in just 3 gulps. But right then, he realized that he didn't know how long he was going to be trapped here. Now he would have to use the remaining water carefully. After calming his senses a bit, Aaron started thinking of a way to free his arm, which had already turned blue due to lack of blood circulation. If he didn't do something soon, he could lose the arm. First, Aaron took out all his gear and saw what things could help him get out. He didn't have a cell phone, which meant he couldn't call anyone for help. From his bag, he took out a CD player, some batteries, a camera, a headlamp, some ropes, a carabiner, and a multi-tool device. Looking at his gear, he figured he had only 3 viable options. Either use his multi-tool to try and break the boulder from its edges, use the ropes to create a pulley system to lift the boulder, or the third and most difficult option, cut off his own arm. Obviously, he didn't want to think about this last option. He immediately took out the knife from his multi-tool and started chipping away at the boulder. Hours passed. Daylight turned into night's darkness, but not even a corner of the boulder moved or broke. The entire night passed in this effort, and by the next morning, aside from a few small fragments of the boulder, he hadn't broken anything significant. He immediately turned his attention to the second plan. Now he had to create a pulley system so he could lift the boulder. With great difficulty, using one hand, he hung the pulley from a rock on the wall and looped the rope around the fallen boulder. The advantage of a pulley is that it requires less force to lift any weight. He thought maybe with the pulley, even if he could lift the boulder slightly, he could free his arm. But no matter how hard he tried with one hand, he couldn't. After several more hours of failed effort, Aaron went back to chipping away at the boulder. But once again, no significant result. By 3 a.m. the next day, Aaron had been trapped in the canyon for 24 hours. When he saw all his efforts failing, he picked up the camera and recorded a video message. "It's Sunday, 3:05. I've been trapped in Blue John Canyon for 24 hours. My name is Aaron Ralston. Whoever finds this video, please, for God's sake, get it to my parents." Aaron then shows his crushed arm under the boulder to the camera and recounts all his efforts over the past 24 hours. After that, with tearful eyes, he says goodbye to his family. The next morning, he was completely exhausted by hunger, thirst, and pain. Finally, he started thinking about his last option. What if he cut his arm off to free himself from the boulder? His condition was so dire that he was ready to lose his hand to escape death. The first thought that came to his mind when thinking about cutting off his arm was blood loss. He had an idea that he could use his water drinking tube as a tourniquet to reduce blood flow. But the real obstacle was his knife, which he would have to use to cut his arm. That small knife on his multi-tool was already dull, which would make this task extremely painful. Moreover, cutting through the bone with that knife was practically impossible. By 5 the next morning, he had been trapped in the canyon for about 68 hours. His body was slowly giving up due to hunger and thirst. The last few drops of water in his bottle were gone. Since the previous day, he had been collecting his urine in a thermos bag tied around his waist. Now, to stay alive any longer, he would have to drink that. He picked up the camera again, recorded some goodbye messages for his family, and then once again resigned himself to death. Another night and another full day passed in this helplessness. Sometimes he would hallucinate in a semi-conscious state. Sometimes he would count the hours he'd been trapped in the canyon, and sometimes he would curse himself for not telling someone where he was going. But the worst agony was when his throat would become completely dry and cause severe pain, and in the intensity of thirst, he would have to take sips of his own urine. Every time, his stomach would churn with disgust, but there was nothing left in his body to vomit. On the morning of May 1st, at 9 a.m., Aaron had been trapped in the canyon for 120 hours. So far, there was no hope of freeing his arm, nor any hope of help arriving. For the past 3 days, he had been shouting loudly in case someone might hear him, but it was impossible for sound to escape this canyon. And even if it did, who would hear it in this national park spread over thousands of square kilometers? Defeated, Aaron closed his eyes once more. But just as he drifted into sleep, he saw a dream. A 3-year-old child moving toward him. Aaron knew it was his son. Aaron stepped forward and wanted to pick him up in his lap, but he noticed that his right arm was cut off, the same arm that was still trapped under the boulder. At that sight, Aaron woke up. Aaron didn't have a son at that time, but he realized that he had seen his future in that dream. Perhaps it was a sign that he could still go back alive. Thinking this, life suddenly surged back into Aaron's lifeless body. By now, his arm had completely decomposed. When Aaron inserted the knife into his arm, the flesh dissolved like hot butter, and he could hear gas escaping from the wound. This meant that cutting the flesh was now much easier than before, but the bone was still strong. He had to cut that bone no matter what. Then an idea came to his mind. Until now, he had only been thinking of ways to cut the bone, but he could also break it. His arm was bent at a strange angle behind the boulder, and it was high enough off the ground that he could stand up straight. That meant if he put pressure on the bone of his trapped arm by trying to sit down on the ground, the torque might break the bone. For the first time in 5 days, Aaron felt from the bottom of his heart that something might be possible. Without wasting another moment, he did just that. He finally managed to break the bone. Then, using the same knife, he cut through the rest of his arm and freed himself. But the trouble wasn't completely over yet. Before he bled out, he had to get out of the canyon and reach his truck, which was miles away. Tired, exhausted, and weak, Aaron crossed the uneven canyon walls and boulders with the help of only one arm and finally made it out. Just a little further ahead, he encountered a family on vacation. They gave Aaron food and water and immediately called for help. Approximately 4 hours after cutting off his arm and 127 hours after getting trapped in the canyon, Aron Ralston was finally rescued by helicopter. During the painful 6 days and 5 nights, his weight had dropped by 40 pounds, and his blood volume had decreased by 25%. A few days later, a team of 13 people used a hydraulic jack and winch to move the 360 kilograms boulder and recover Aaron's arm. 6 months after the accident, on his 28th birthday, Aaron returned to the same canyon with a TV crew and told his entire story. But this was just the beginning. In the coming years, Aaron became a celebrity and participated in many shows and events. His own book, Between a Rock and a Hard Place, became a bestseller in many countries. In 2010, a film named 127 Hours was made on his accident. The scene where Aaron is shown cutting off his arm caused many people to faint. In February 2020, his first son was born. The same son who had come to save him in his life's most difficult moment 7 years earlier. Immediately after his recovery, he restarted his plan to conquer all 59 14ers. In 2005, he became the first person to solo all those peaks in winter. Today, Aron Ralston not only continues climbing with a prosthetic arm, but he is also a corporate motivational speaker who charges several $1,000s for a single session lasting a few hours. In one of his speeches, remembering the accident, he said, "I lost my hand, but I regained my life." We hope that you will also like and share this video from ALGEM TV abundantly. Thank you so much for your loving comments.